I'm going to do a very short video on how to make your own spot weld or plug weld nozzle. We're getting very close to the point where we're going to be plug welding or spot welding this panel back onto the Mercedes. So we'll be drilling holes here. We'll either use a special spot weld hole pliers to cut the holes, or we'll be using a step drill to make the holes, and then we'll be welding it on. And the idea is that you just basically fill the hole with weld. If you're an experienced welder, you'll just be doing that by eye. If you're an inexperienced welder like me, I'm going to be using every tool at my disposal to make my life easier. So you can buy these little spot weld or plug weld nozzles, and the idea is that they basically will hold your MIG torch at exactly the right distance from the workpiece for you to do the perfect plug or spot weld. And the other advantage is you'll be able to push down on the panels with the welder if you've got any gap, if they're not clamped down together properly. Okay, now the problem is, or that you may face, you may not face, is if you've got a MIG welder like this is just a Clark MIG welder, the sort of cheap and cheerful ones that you might get in the UK. It's not actually that cheap. This is about £400 worth. You may find that the nozzles that you buy don't fit your welder, and that's certainly the case. That's certainly what we found. So the first attempt was to get onto eBay and to buy some cheap spot weld or plug weld nozzles like this, and the idea is that these are supposed to fit over your, they just slide over your nozzle, but they don't work at all. Okay, the end of the nozzle just screws off like this. Okay, and some companies like Eastwood do produce a spot weld plug weld nozzle. It looks very nice, but the trouble is the Eastwood welders are much bigger than this, and that screw fitting doesn't fit over there. Okay, so we've got a couple of options. The first thing we're going to do is knock out the interior of this and just put an insert like this, which we got on eBay, a threaded insert, and that's going to allow us to basically modify the spot weld nozzle like this. So this is the actual nozzle from the plug welder. You can see it's an M8 fitting. Okay, and when we've modified this, you can see that it's not quite the right length. Okay, this should actually be up there like so. So I'm going to do another one of these. They come in two in a pack. I'm just going to use an angle grinder to cut off that last quarter inch and make it exactly the right length, and make up another one of these. This one works absolutely fine in terms of screwing on, but I don't know if the distance of this copper tip here from the end makes a difference. So we're going to make up another one of those. The Eastwood welding tip, I think I'm also going to cut off a chunk and maybe use a helicoil thread insert in that, and then that will just screw straight on like so. First thing I'm going to do is just with a bit of masking tape mask off the bit that we've got to cut off. We're just going to clamp it in the end of there and use a cut-off wheel on an angle grinder to cut that end bit off. To knock the insert out of there, which is just a bit of cardboard and a metal ring, we've just used an old upper control arm bolt which happens to fit in there exactly like so. Okay, and now all we have to do is just insert one of our threaded rubber inserts in there, and that should be job done. I'm going to take a little bit of 8mm threaded bar, cut it off, screw one of these on, put it in the end of the drill, and then we'll be able to get rid of that rubber ridge there. So we just screw that on, stick the other end in the drill, and then we'll just rub that on a wall until that comes off. Okay, so we just use the drill to force that in, and basically this ridge here is going to hold that rubber insert in. Should be perfect. We're just going to cut a couple of test holes in here with these jogglers. These tend to cut the holes quite close to the edge, which I don't like. And ideally you would want your spot weld holes not so close to the edge, so I'm not sure I'm actually going to use these on the car, but it's very quick and easy to cut holes, much quicker than using a drill, and you don't get any burrs. This is 18 gauge steel, so it works pretty well on there. The only thing that these spot weld pliers do, in conjunction with the spot weld nozzle, I don't know if I can show you this on camera, but it's very difficult to, when you've got a mask on, to actually line the wire up with the hole that you're trying to plug weld. With these spot weld pliers and with this nozzle, it's dead easy because you just push it in as far as it goes and then you hit the trigger for a few seconds. That you get a perfect weld every time, but if you line these pliers up properly, you get a pretty good weld. Now, I am definitely no welder. I've never done any spot welding or plug welding before. This is my first attempt here, and I didn't quite have the plug weld pliers in the right place and just burned out the edge slightly. The second attempt looks an awful lot better. Possibly held my finger on the trigger slightly too long, but what you do is you just grind that down flat, but it's not burnt out there at the edges, and that's got pretty good penetration. Incidentally, these ones here that I'm holding is where I forgot to turn the gas on, and you see you get that very uneven weld surface, whereas once you've got the gas on, you should get these nice smooth surfaces. So I've got a little bit of practicing to do, but my conclusion on the spot weld pliers is it makes it really easy to line up the spot weld nozzle, and it's almost impossible to blow through if you're using those spot weld pliers. My conclusion on the spot weld nozzle is, if you're a professional, you will probably never ever need to use one, but if you're an amateur like me, it just makes it very, very almost foolproof in terms of doing those plug welds. The last thing I would mention is I'm practicing my plug welding on 2 pieces of 18 gauge steel, and I found the best results were by cranking this up to number 3 and keeping the wire speed on about 6 and just giving it a blast for 2 seconds. So, as I say, this is a Clark 151 TE welder. Everyone's welder is going to be different, but if you're just butt welding, I normally have this on 1. If you're plug welding 20 or 22 gauge, I'd have it on 2, but for plug welding 18 gauge, I actually moved the heat up. Once again, we're using a EcoFlow Delta, which is just a battery to run this welder, and we're not tripping it in any way, so that's doing really well. We got a couple of those cheap and cheerful spot welding nozzles from these guys here. Cost us £6.90 delivered. The spot weld pliers are not cheap, but they are quite useful. Paid £26.51 for them from these guys here. These rubber inserts here, we needed M8 ones fitted perfectly inside the spot weld nozzles, and a bag of 5 of them cost us £5.20.